Hello, it's me, and it's time for another top 10 puzzle. So before I did the top 10 hardest puzzles, now what I'm going to do is the top 10 most complex looking puzzles. So what exactly do I mean by that? What is a complex looking puzzle? Well, something that's complex has a lot of moving parts, a lot of joining parts. It's something that just looks complicated. Now understand that this is the most complex looking puzzle. So it's not enough that it is complex and complicated. It also has to look the part. So this is all about the wow factor. These are the kind of puzzles where if I'm showing my collection, these are the ones that I pull out to show the extremes of what twisty puzzle technology has gotten us. Things that they never thought existed, possibly could never even imagine exist. And even when they see it, possibly can't even wrap their heads around. So again, this is all about the show. So let's define a little bit more about what's gonna be a qualifier for this, for the most complex looking. So for example, here's a standard 3x3 and here's a 3x3 latch cube. Now there's no doubt that this mechanism, which has this latch mechanism internally, is a lot more complex. If you look, if you take this apart, you've got your standard core and the other pieces. This, if you take it apart, there's a lot more complexity to this. However, this would not qualify because although it is more complex than this puzzle, it doesn't look more complex. So this would not qualify as anything more complex looking than this. So that's really what I mean by that. Now take a look at this one over here. This looks like a 3x3. This is actually less complex than this because this actually isn't a 3x3. As I move it, it has this configuration here. This is really a 3x3x2 where extensions have been glued onto it to look like a 3x3. So this is an example of three puzzles where this is more complex than this, and this is more complex than this, but they're all the same in terms of complex looking. This has maybe extra stickers on it that look a little bit different, but these would not qualify as being more complex looking. As opposed to if you take a look at modifications of a 3x3, we put it into a dodecahedron form, we put it into octahedron form. These actually are not more complex than a 3x3 because they're 3x3 mods, but they look more complex. So that's really what I mean by more complex looking. Now, to be more complex looking doesn't mean that it's particularly difficult to solve. So as we keep going up higher and higher on the layers of 3x3, 4x4, 5x5, you'll find that it's not so much that it's more complicated to solve, but it's more complex looking. So again, it's not about the difficulty, it's not that it's harder to solve, it's not that the internal structure is more complex. Again, this is all about the wow factor. This is all about the impressiveness of just how complex it looks, which means that it probably is complex as well. So what is it that makes a puzzle more complex looking? What are the aspects of it that gives it those features? So one way to increase the complexity is what I call multiplicity. Multiplicity can come in two forms. It can come as a sequential solving puzzle or as a hybrid. A multiplicity is where you have a bunch of different types of puzzles all combined in one. So you can take one puzzle, combine it with another puzzle in the same puzzle, and that's where you have like multiplicity, where you have two different types of puzzles in one. So what do I mean by the first type, which is sequential solves, a sequential solve? This is the kind of puzzle where you've got two puzzles in one, and you solve one and then the other. So the scramble of both types of puzzles happen independently and the solve happens independently. So what do I mean by that? Well, that's something like this puzzle over here. So this is a multi-cube. A multi-cube is where you basically have two puzzles in one. You've got the obvious master cube on the outside. It moves, acts, behaves exactly like a master cube, but in the center you've got basically a compy cube. A compy cube moves exactly like a compy cube and is scrambled as a compy cube. So it's got a compy cube inside a master's cube. And it's not exactly a hybrid because you solve them independently. You solve this first and then the master's cube outside of it, or you solve the master's cube and you solve this, the compy cube inside of it. So that's as opposed to a hybrid. It's not the same thing as a compy cube. A compy cube was made by Tom Z. And that's a true hybrid puzzle where you have both in one. This was made by Gregor Fenig, where it's not a hybrid in that it's a sequential solve. You solve one versus the other as opposed to combining two in one. So this is an example of a sequential solve under the subheading of multiplicity. The other subheading under multiplicity would be, of course, the hybrids. So a hybrid, this is an example of a hybrid where you don't have a sequential solve of it, they're both combined in one, and this is a true hybrid. There's others that are partial hybrids that I've shown in the past. This is a true hybrid where you have dino cuts over here, so this is a dino skewb, and then you have skewb cuts over here. So you can solve it as either or. You can solve it just as a dino cube or just as a skewb. If I were to just do skewb moves, I can do that. Or what you can do is you can combine them. I can do a dino move here, and then I can do a skewb move over here and scramble it like that. When you scramble it, it's neither one individually, it's both and yet neither. So you don't solve it sequentially, you can maybe reduce it to one or reduce it to another. And as I've said before, the hybrid cubes, hybridization is a way of making a cube more complicated, making it harder. But it also is a form of making it more complex. So that's multiplicity, where you have either a sequential solve or a hybridization. These are ways of increasing the complexity of a cube or the complex appearing of a cube. So that's one way of getting a puzzle to be more complex looking, is multiplicity by way of sequential puzzles, sequential solves, such as one at a time. You can see how complex this look, or hybridization, which is a subset of that, where you have two in one. So that's multiplicity. The other way to increase something as becoming more complex looking would be transformation. So what do I mean by transformation? Well, transformation is basically the process of modding. When you take a puzzle of one look to it, like a cube, and then you transform it to a different kind of a shape, like a pyramid. So for instance, when I took this and I turned it into a dodecahedron, or I turned it into an octahedron, it made it look more complex. So the process of transformation will increase the complexity, and mostly that happens when you take it down, when you take it down a level. For instance, if you take a PETAMINX, which is a 12-sided puzzle, chop it down to the same type of puzzle but turn it into a cube, you end up with this guy, a hexaminx. So this is actually the same puzzle, but it has more of a complex look to it. The movement is more complex, more confusing. This one, has its degree of complexity, but the movement is pretty straightforward. There's no real surprises here. This, it just looks more complicated. It has more of that wow factor, and even as you turn it, and when I show it to people, they have a hard time wrapping their heads around exactly what it is, and then they see the shape shifting, and the puzzle looks even more complex as it's turning into something all jumbled up until it gets into its full scrambled form. So this process of transformation is a way of making a puzzle look more complex. Now you may say, well, sure, but you're not really increasing the complexity of it. But again, this is not about the internal complexity. This is about the wow factor. This is like the supermodels of the cube field. So it's something that has all the look of complexity, not just the actual complexity of itself. And I would say that this is more of a complex scramble and more of a complex solve because it turns it into a supercube and makes perspective something of an issue. So the process of transformation is another way of increasing the complex looking aspect of the puzzle. So the third and final way, the third and final category of something that you can do to make something more complex looking is what I call the over the top. Now, over the top is the name of a puzzle, but it's also the name of a category of something that increases the complex looking aspect of a puzzle. So, you take a 3x3, then you have a 4x4, then you have a 4x4, 5x5, 6x6. You keep adding layers until you get into more and more layers like this 11x11. So this would be an example of a category of over the top, where it doesn't really increase the difficulty of the puzzle, but it just increases the apparent complexity. There's an obvious difference when you look at the complexity of a 3x3 versus the complexity of an 11x11. So this is just an example. So the over-the-top category, in addition to being an actual puzzle, it's a category of an entire way of increasing the number of layers or increasing the number of sides just for the sake of increasing the level of complexity. So this goes for any type of puzzle, whether it's a dodecahedron or whether it's a pyramid. Over the top means ever expanding layers, and to keep going to a theme to almost its ridiculous conclusion. But not just that, but also the number of sides. So there's 4-sided puzzles, 5, 6, 7, 8. So another example of a type of an over-the-top is if you've increased the number of sides, like this face-turning icosahedron. So this is an example of a 20-sided puzzle. So looking at this, this is another category of like an over-the-top. Whether it's a vast number of layers or a vast number of sides, the over-the-top category is where you take a concept and you take it to its almost ridiculous extreme. So the over-the-top would be another way of enhancing the complexity. So those are the aspects of what I mean that increases the complex appearance of a puzzle. Again, it doesn't mean it's particularly more complicated on the inside, but it appears to be more complicated. Even though this is more complicated, it doesn't have the appearance, so it would not qualify. It doesn't mean it's particularly harder. It just means that somebody did some brilliant working and decided to make something look even more complex in its appearance. Whether it's multiplicity because of sequential solving, hybridization, or if it's a transformation to something that's of lower layers but has the same internal structure, or an over-the-top where they just extended it to almost ridiculous levels. So with that said, with that background, what then, amongst the puzzles that I have, that I've identified within my collection anyway, as the most complex looking puzzles? Again, this is all about how it looks, this is all about just how impressive it is. So number 10 is what I guess I would call a transformation, and that would be this guy over here. And this is number 10. This is the 7x7 ghost cube. So I've always enjoyed the challenge of a ghost cube because of its challenge. This was designed by Ming Thang Vo, which is a transformation of a 7x7. I have a long and involved solve of this. Now the reason why this is a transformation is that this is actually solved and scrambled off center. So really when you think about it, the actual shape of this puzzle as it was designed is really something, well, get it into position here. Really, in reality, this is a transformation from a cube to this shape, which might not seem to make a whole lot of sense as is, but then you have to turn it from its mid-turn area, and that'll get you back into a cube version. Now the thing about this puzzle is it took a while. It's a massive perspective bender because you've got all these little pieces that have very specific places, and it's hard to say exactly where it is, so you have to line it up. So it actually is a pretty difficult puzzle. But in terms of the complexity and how complex looking it is, when showing this, if people don't know what a ghost cube is, and then I explained it to them, they can really see how this puzzle is challenging. This took me a while, not because of the algorithms, but because of the perspective and hunting around for pieces. Now, I had actually worked closely early on with Ming regarding getting different ghost cubes, and I remember when he was first making the 4x4 ghost cube, and I had asked him, can I get a 5x5, then a 6x6, and then ultimately a 7x7, and he was very good about providing me with these fantastic puzzles. In terms of mass production, we've got the 3x3 and a lot of variants of 3x3 ghost puzzles. However, I think the 4x4 is definitely ripe for becoming mass produced. So anyway, there you have it, number 10. So number 9 is on an over-the-top category, and that would be this guy over here. This is the Emperor PYRAMINX, the highest order PYRAMINX that's out there. I don't know how many of these are around or how many are available. When I got this, it was the only one that was made. I have a video on how to solve it, or how I solved it, which I think is the only video that's out there. But basically, it's the highest level of PYRAMINX. And this was made by Timur Badarov. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And this is basically a 7x7 version of that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Of course, we're counting the trivial tips, which maybe you shouldn't do. Maybe it's really more of a 6x6. But like the ghost cube here before it, it's usually considered a 7x7 variant of it. The solve of this gets more and more complex. Mass-produced versions of the PYRAMINX. You've got the standard PYRAMINX, the master PYRAMINX, and the Professor PYRAMINX. Beyond that, there's a Royal PYRAMINX, and now this guy over here, which is the Emperor PYRAMINX. Moves very well. The bottom layers do take a little bit of moving, but you can see just the complexity of this. So anyone who enjoys PYRAMINXs, if they talk about how, well, I can't solve the cube, but I can solve a PYRAMINX, I show them something like this, and they're just amazed that something like this actually exists. A very fun solve, takes a little while to do, but certainly qualifies because it's the highest order of its kind as an over-the-top just by its sheer number of layers. So occupying a very prominent role in the top 10 is number 9, which is the Emperor PYRAMINX. So what then is number 8? So number 8 in the wow factor actually has two components. You can think of it as an over-the-top kind of a puzzle, and you can also think of it as a hybrid puzzle, and that would be this guy over here. So this is called a TUTTMINX. TUTTMINX. So when you look at it, when I pull a puzzle like this out, anybody who's just used to a Rubik's Cube will look at this as being way over the top just by the sheer number of sides, sheer number of movable sides. So you've got these hexagonal sides here, and there's 20 of them. And then you've got these pentagonal sides, and you've got 12 of these. So you get a total of 32 sides. Now, it's a hybrid system where basically it's kind of like an extension of a megaminx. So it's an extension of a dodecahedron into something of a truncated hexahedron, a truncated icosahedron. So in that way, it almost sounds like it's a transformation. It's an over-the-top because it's got the most number of movable sides, and that's really what the outer complexity looks like. The inner hybridization is kind of a little evasive, hard to see, but just looking at this and seeing how every side is freely movable and every side can scramble with every other side. There's no fudging, there's no jumbling, it's just a pure, many-sided complexity with this. So there's no doubt when looking at this, this is really something to highlight when you're showing just where face-turning twisty puzzles have gone, and has a prominent role in the top 10 as number 8. Now there's different versions of this. There's actually more to this. There's a higher order version of this as well, which is the PYRAMINX or the GIGAROULEAXMINX. However, the number of sides are the same, so it's not any more over the top than what this is. There's the FOOTMINX. There's a variety of others that are kind of like this, but this is what I have in my collection, and this is a nice mass-produced puzzle that you can pick up. I highly recommend it, and that would be number 8. So what's number 7? So this next one is a pretty fascinating one, made by Matt Bonner. It is in the category of transformation, and it's this guy over here, which is a GIGAROULEAXMINX. Now a rouleauminx generally refers to a megaminx which has been carved down into a tetrahedral form, a pyramidal form. There's nothing of that I know of that's mass-produced. There's no triangular, there's no pyramidal version of this. So there's a megaminx version, a megaminx that's a rouleauminx. This is a gigaminx as a rouleauminx. So this is a GIGAROULEAXMINX. So it's a transformation, and what I like about it is it's really pretty artistic looking in terms of how it looks. So even if you don't scramble it, it looks really fascinating. And when you look at it, you wonder, how do you get all these pieces to move? Well, this is how. You've got this layer over here, then you've got this layer over here. Moves surprisingly well. I've often wondered just how fragile it is, but when I saw it, I fell immediately in love with it and knew I must have it. So if I were to try to do other shape-shifting moves, so here's another shape-shifting move over here. Let me make sure I got it in the camera here. So it moves actually pretty well. This is one of the puzzles that I hesitate to scramble because even though it looks like it's moving pretty well, the pieces look so small and so fragile, I'd hate to ruin it. It's almost good just to have it. You can see there's a lot of residue here. Let's move this up a little bit. So it's pretty fascinating in its look and its feel. It actually does move very smooth. But this is one of those puzzles that I'm very hesitant to scramble, not because I don't think I can solve it. It's basically a, just a gigaminx solve, but just because I don't want to cause any damage to it. So it's almost more of a collector's item. I probably will scramble it at some point because I don't like to have a puzzle in my collection that I actually have not scrambled yet. Let's see if I can get another shape-shifting turn. But it's a pretty fascinating puzzle, in its wow factor. It's a very complex looking transformation. So there it is, Matt Bonner's GIGAROULEAXMINX. I'm going to try to carefully turn it back. Now I did have to do a lot of lubrication with that, so you can see some of the stickers are fading. I'm going to look to see if I can't get a replacement set of stickers for it. But this really is a very fascinating looking puzzle. And like I say, it really does move very smooth, as you can see. Smoother than most, smoother than a lot that I've had. And I think maybe I should, at some point, give it a scramble. Maybe I'll do it right now. Maybe for the first time on camera, I'll do a full scramble of this. Nah. Yeah, so this can move out here at some point. But the more I'm turning it, the more comfortable I'm getting with it too. I guess some of the lubrication that I did is setting in, and all of this residue that's coming out. Yeah, I like the fact that it's not a rouleau type puzzle. It's a straight tetrahedron. So it really has nothing to do with the rouleau shape, so to speak. But there it is, number 7 in the most complex looking twisty puzzles. So where do we have it number 6? So prominently is number 6, and the good news with this is mass produced. This is a over-the-top kind of a puzzle, and that would be this guy over here, the PETAMINX. PETAMINX is highest order version of this guy, the PETAMINX. And you can just see how complex looking it is. Now this is not the mass-produced PETAMINX. This is actually one of the original 3-dimensionally printed PETAMINXs, which is very stable. Actually missing a sticker here, but you can see how well it moves. This is all 3-dimensionally printed over here. Again, one of those puzzles where it's not particularly harder than a GIGAROULEAXMINX, it just takes more time. It takes more of a reductive process. So here, this is over here. This was designed, invented by Andrew Cormier, and the original prints cost many thousands of dollars. So to those of you who have an opportunity to buy this for like $100, don't fret about that. I can guarantee you're paying a lot less than I paid for this guy. So this is more just as a collector's item. It's 3-dimensionally printed. It's one of the original PETAMINXs, bought at a time when I did not think that it was ever going to be mass produced. Now I understand that there is a higher version of this. There's a TUTTMINX, I think it's called, made by the same guy who put this together. However, as this is only the puzzles that are in my collection, this is the one that I can display prominently for the wow factor as an over-the-top class of puzzle, being the highest order that I have anyway of the PETAMINX family. So there you have it. Among the top 10, this is 10 through 6 of the most complex puzzles. A transformation, an over-the-top, another over-the-top, a transformation, and another over-the-top type category. So what then would be within the top 5?